Michael Biehn played leading roles in two cult films, Terminator and Aliens, and it seemed his success in Hollywood was predetermined. But despite an impressive start in the 80s, his career began to decline.
On July 31, 1956, in the city of Anniston, in northeastern Alabama, the future father of the savior of mankind, Michael Connell Biehn, was born. Unlike many similar stories in which actors got into the profession by a lucky chance, Michael wanted to act in films since he was a child, and went into this industry purposefully. While still at school, he went to an acting skills club, then entered the drama department in Arizona, but his studies weighed him down, so after 2 years, he left her to, at the age of 19 years, move to where all the most interesting things happen. At the Dream Factory, Michael operated according to the classic scheme: part-time jobs, castings, attempts to shine because he had a model-like appearance. Then he posed for magazines and starred in commercials. Soon, he began to be offered his first small roles, sometimes very small.
Like many famous actors of his time, Biehn began his career by appearing in commercials and TV films. In 1977, he made his debut in the TV series Logan's Run, where his character had only one line.
Alert, runner headed for quadrant 4. Intercept.
As the actor recalled, he was so worried that after saying the first sentence, he forgot about the second. Then, after a pause, he came to his senses and continued repeating the line again. So yes, I managed to get through these 2 lines. It was my debut in cinema, Biehn recalled with a laugh years later.
The first really successful film with the actor's participation was Grease. Michael was originally considered for the role of Tom, but they gave it to Lorenzo Lamas, and Biehn played this basketball player who got punched in the gut by John Travolta. Then there was a frivolous TV project about the beach movie, 1978 year Zuma Beach, which would not have been remembered if would not the fact that his screenwriter suddenly turned out one of the fathers of bloody slashers, John Carpenter. And does this description of the film remind you of anything? Astronomers discover a comet. The celestial body will soon crash into the Earth. Scientists are trying to warn the government, but no one believes them. No, this is not the 2021 satire, Don't Look Up with DiCaprio. This unknown film 1978, A Fire in the Sky, with Michael Biehn, although not in the leading role.
Oh, one more thing.
What?
Scrape the manure off your boots, otherwise he'll get suspicious.
Having collected a portfolio and acquired an agent, not just anyone but a big profit on future stars, Ed Limato,
who in different years worked with such stars as Richard Gere, Mel Gibson, and Michelle Pfeiffer. Michael was not yet a star, but soon played 2 notable roles in comedies Coach and Hog Wild, and in 1981 he went to Los Angeles
to join film noir legend Lauren Bacall on set. This was Biehn's first Hollywood film. He was called The Fan. He was offered to play the main villain, and in it, the actor played a record salesman who becomes obsessed with a 50-year-old actress, gradually turning her life into a nightmare. On paper, everything looked good. The main character is a Broadway star, played by a real-life Broadway star and widow of the legendary Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall. Partners are all stars of the golden age of Hollywood, winners of a bunch of film and theater awards. Biehn played a psychopathic stalker, stalking an actress. The Fan was originally planned with a psychological bent, but after the success of Brian De Palma's thriller Dressed to Kill, direction has changed, making the script more gritty and spicing up the story with more spicy and piquant ingredients. The film came out at a difficult time for American society, when the stories of the persecution of Jodie Foster and Jacqueline Bisset were actively discussed, and Beatles fans still haven't recovered from the loss of John Lennon, who was being stalked at his home by Mark Chapman. Biehn suggested that this was the key factor in the failure of the fan. Allegedly, he was too obviously rubbing salt into fresh wounds, and the audience did not want to relive the unpleasant experience. Of course, the film with such a cast attracted increased attention from viewers, critics, and journalists, but the result was very mediocre, and even veteran actors couldn't pull off the weak script, and Biehn himself is not very convincing, and sometimes openly copies the greats. But he walked the red carpet for the first time, signed his first autographs, and took heartily photos with the audience, which is also not bad. As a result, the film, which cost $9 million, brought in only $3 million at the domestic box office in the United States. It was Biehn's first major failure on the big screen. 1983. Michael Biehn continues to actively look for work by auditioning for the play Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. He heads off to the next one without much enthusiasm, casting for some obscure film, as seemed to him, about time travel. The tests are going well overall, but producers are confused by Michael's pronounced Southern accent.
I was at the casting and got a message from my agents that they really liked me, they thought I was right for the role, but they didn't want to hire someone from the South. Looks too much like a Southerner. And me and my agents are like, what are you talking about? I'm from Nebraska and not from the South. That's the center of America. And when they saw me again, they realized what had happened.
Soon becomes clear that Biehn simply forgot to step out of his Southerner image after the previous listening. Fortunately, no one else has been approved yet, and Michael managed to come back, sort everything out, and get the role. Role of Sergeant Kyle Reese in the future Terminator. The film was directed by then unknown James Cameron, who turned out to be a true professional, so in love with his project that Michael also eventually got fired up about it. True, filming had to be postponed for 9 months. 7 certainly don't wait for 1, but if this one rising star Arnold Schwarzenegger busy with Conan sequel, and you're a young unknown director with Piranha 2 on your resume, then in such a situation, they wait.
I'll be back.
During the waiting time, Michael Biehn managed to do 2 very important things. Firstly, work on the role and prepare for filming. But he couldn't ask for real fighters against cyborgs, but came up with another way. To penetrate with the character, Biehn studied the memories of the Polish resistance fighters during World War II, people whose experiences were similar to what his hero went through.
Your world is pretty scary.
Secondly, and no less importantly, Michael became real friends with Cameron, as turns out later, the main director in his career. Now, many people write that Cameron is a despot on the set, but Biehn liked the director's authoritarian character. Michael explained this by the fact that unlike actors with inflated egos, he is not afraid to listen to critical comments about his performance. Cameron, in turn, also appreciated the actor's patience, giving him the following description. For me, he is a man who expresses masculine values that I admire: strength, honesty, sense of duty, conviction. In general, the couple worked well together, and on the set of Terminator, Michael not only unquestioningly followed James's instructions, but also made suggestions himself. For example, in the original version of the script, it was indicated that his character, Kyle Reese, answers the psychologist's questions. While a video camera located under the ceiling is secretly filming, Biehn decided that his character should guess that he was being watched and raising your head to look into the camera lens. It was a shame with the work in Terminator. Michael played the tough guy very well, main character, but Terminator became one of those movies where the main villain all eclipses. For the rest of his career, journalists will pester Biehn with questions about working together with the Austrian actor.
We never worked together, and there were no common scenes. This was the only time we were both in the frame. I mean, we always ran away from him.
But Michael Biehn hardly worried about it. It seemed everything was just beginning. Everyone was young, beautiful, and happy that the film didn't flop and even made a little money. Yes, now we perceive Terminator as an absolute hit, but it became a hit only years after premiere, and in large part thanks to videotapes. Watching Terminator now, it's easy to think of it as a flawless film destined for success, but back then in the distant year of '84, it was not so. According to Michael Biehn, the film made a good $38 million, which, however, completely fades away if we remember that in the same year the family and now forgotten film The Karate Kid easily overcame the $90 million mark. Nevertheless, the beginning of the collaboration between Biehn and Cameron was laid. And 2 years later, the actor again played in the director's impantastic action film, Aliens. Michael Biehn was out of work until another killing machine came into his life. No longer cybernetic, but alien, but no less heartless and cruel. Biehn didn't get into the cast not by connections at all, as you might think. After all, his role was originally played by James Remar. The actor's sudden departure was explained by creative differences with the director. But several years later, Remar admitted in an interview that he had stored and used various illegal substances. Michael hasn't consumed anything yet, at least not in quantities that would interfere with his work. Producers contacted him on Friday, and by Monday, Sergeant Reese had been demoted to Corporal Hicks and took on board the spaceship to planet LV-426. The filming schedule was tight. Biehn had to integrate literally on the fly. Biehn wore a uniform that was frankly too small for him. After all, it was originally sewn under the Remar. In addition, Michael suffered from insufficient physical training, and they decided not to reshoot the general plans of the scenes already filmed with Remar. Expensive, complicated, and still no one will notice. Michael Biehn plays the iconic character for the second time, and as in the case of The Terminator, the audience's attention was largely focused on other actors. The main character, Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, and to the most humane cyborg, Bishop, Lance Henriksen. Hicks got injured, missed all the fun, and fell asleep peacefully in the cryocapsule. In the end, thanks to Aliens, 1986 became the highest point of popularity for Michael. Cameron made one of the best sequels in cinema history. The film won 2 technical Oscars, 5 more nominations. Michael, despite all the difficulties, demonstrated excellent acting. He was nominated for the prestigious Saturn Award for Best Actor, and he found himself somewhere very close with that who was called a Hollywood star. First, but far from not the last time, he played a Marine. True, at that time he still didn't suspect what kind of nerves this luck would turn into in the future. 3 years later, he played the third most important role in the deep-sea sci-fi with revolutionary CGI effects, The Abyss. For bravery in the fight against xenomorphs, James Cameron promotes Corporal Hicks in the person of Michael immediately to lieutenant and sends him to the bottom of the ocean to save a submarine. So in 1988, the third collaboration between Cameron and Biehn begins. The film begins with an excerpt from Nietzsche's quote in the prologue: "If you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." Another quote would also fit here: "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster himself." This soulless monster, no less cruel than the Terminator and the Alien, becomes James Cameron himself, having decided to make a technically impossible film.
I'm James Cameron, and I want to go with you into a world of cold, darkness, and great pressure.
He set up a giant underwater film set, sent the actors on a 3-week diving course, and spent hours filming underwater scenes. The actor constantly had to undergo decompression, that is, to rise to the surface with stops, to properly remove gases from the body tissue. Michael Biehn once again got the role of a military man, but this time an antagonist, and was thanks to Michael, managed the character was made more convincing. It's him came up with justification that Lieutenant Coffee goes crazy for a reason.
And because of the real existing neurological syndrome of high blood pressure. The most controversial decision is perhaps the character's mustache. Michael, for some reason, decided that they would give the Coffee a menacing look. The filming was delayed, the team's mood was spoiled. Cameron was furious but did not retreat. Michael Biehn spent 5 months on set, of which only 4 weeks were actually filmed. He recalled that once, when he was at a depth of 10 meters, the lights suddenly went out. Michael was overcome with panic.
I knew that it will be a very difficult shoot because I was filming aliens. That wasn't a picnic either. And I worked with Jim before, and I understood well what was waiting, much more than other actors.
Nevertheless, this is an acting job. Michael's clear success, he did a great job of showing how a person turns into a madman when he being in such unusual circumstances. Studio bosses in every push through his candidacy for an Oscar, but before the shortlist, he so not got there. True, if with Terminator and Aliens after all the difficulties became unconditional box office hits, then with The Abyss, everything is not so clear. Critics accepted the film, but the audience reacted coolly to him, which resulted in weak collections. Cameron lost his temper and called the film the worst of all those over which he worked on. He never collaborated with anyone on the team again. The only exception, as you probably already guessed, was Michael Biehn. By the second half of the 80s, Biehn had become one of the brightest and most promising young stars in Hollywood and seemed actor who was about to climb to the top of the cinema Olympus, but this did not happen, however. The film Rampage, in which Michael played one of the main roles, and which was directed by the outstanding director William Friedkin, touched upon the current topic of capital punishment for particularly serious crimes. In the actor's filmography, Rampage is stand right after Aliens and is dated 1987, but this date is a pure formality. On the eve of the premiere, producer Dino De Laurentiis, which was supposed to roll out this brutal drama, became bankrupt, and the tape was put on the shelf, where it gathered dust for 5 long years, until the company Miramax bought it and did not release it in limited release in the USA. Fate turned out sadly Rampage, and on video media, the film is still impossible to find in decent quality, and he only exists on VHS copies. After Rampage, Biehn suffered another setback. He starred in a film under aptly titled Time Bomb, which became a so-called box office bomb, that is, failed at the box office. This film contains allusions to the Terminator. For example, a man and a girl hide in the city from bad people, going through the same stages of relationships, from distrust to attraction and then to complete fusion in a hotel room. Meet and quote from Terminator. Hero Biehn says,
You just do what I say. Exactly what I say. Do you understand me? Do exactly what I say. Exactly.
Biehn, by the way, had doubts about Time Bomb, especially the casting, because the producers approved the British singer and actress Patsy Kensit for the role of the psychiatrist. Patsy was so sweet, seductive, funny. She was supposed to play a psychiatrist, and she was only 20. What a strange casting, Michael recalled about his impressions. Curiously, but approximately the same thoughts are expressed by the hero Biehn in one of the episodes of the film.
You don't look like an analyst.
What do analysts look like?
Old, beard, from Belgium.
Finally, the third major failure in Biehn's solo career was the film Navy SEALs. Nominally, the project seemed promising. Budget $20 million, support for the U.S. Navy, and a whole scattering of charismatic actors like Charlie Sheen and Bill Paxton. The picture could have become a super hit, and she had every chance to do this. Military assistance that provided weapons and equipment. The weak point, as usual, was the script. He even texted while filming, including by the hands of actors. But in reality, everything didn't turn out so well. According to Michael, most of the actors on the set thought they were filming some kind of action movie, Top Gun, that is, about a serious story about military special operations. But as things went on, the director began to add indigestible comedic elements, some of which actually produce an almost schizophrenic impression.
Sorry guys, but I cannot be a part of this funeral procession. See you later!
Biehn called the film the biggest disappointment in his life, and the best thing about this tape was said by Kevin Smith in Clerks.
They never rent quality flicks. They always pick the most intellectually devoid movie on the racks.
Ooh, Navy SEALs!
The next blow was a call from James Cameron, who informed Michael that the scene from Terminator 2 with his participation was not included in the theatrical version of the film. The third setup also didn't keep itself waiting long. To the young and no one unknown David Fincher, who at that time had not filmed anything more complex than commercials and music videos, entrusted continuation of Alien. The aspiring director decided to remove Michael Biehn's character from the story. According to the script, Hicks appeared in the film already dead, another xenomorph allegedly hatched from it. Biehn certainly didn't like this role. They tried to negotiate with Michael, but the actor clearly lost his nerve. He sent all and forbade even the use of a doll with his appearance in the frame. In the end, they agreed that Hicks died heroically in his sleep during an emergency landing. And in the frame, only his photograph will flash.
You know, in Aliens, there were just a few small prices to show this attraction that we have, and it would have been possible to do a little bit of the same in the third Alien and then kill my character, and then, you know, she grieves for my character. It's really the ending of the character. And here it happened, bam, and he's gone, you know? Here's his photo, he's dead. And I don't think it was worthy of what I brought to the relationship with her character, and I think that in this way, it could have been played out much better.
Michael got himself a huge compensation comparable to the fee for Alien, but unlikely that this money made his karma cleaner. The actors also had other roles in their careers, but what kind of movies are these? K2, where Biehn, who is afraid of heights, played a climber, and the filming took place in the mountains. Jade, a promising but failed film. The director of this film, William Friedkin, had long been out of shape by that time, and the script was written by regular Golden Raspberry participant Joe Esterhaas, who everyone mistakenly fell in love with after Basic Instinct. And finally, Susan's Plan, an unsuccessful attempt by John Landis to make a film in the style which was fashionable at the time, Tarantino. After a series of failures with these and other films, Biehn reverted to supporting roles. As a result, 13 years after the release of The Abyss, Biehn played 2 small roles in famous projects. They can be unconditionally included in the list of successes. First, in the excellent Western Tombstone, where Michael played the real-life duelist shooter Johnny Ringo. For this role, he came up with an interesting acting solution to clearly show the aggressiveness of Ringo. You can see that his character doesn't blink at all. Although, and here too worked out problems. Biehn almost left the project when his friend was removed from the director's post and replaced by Greek George Cosmatos. The second one is, of course, The Rock. Not to say Biehn got a particularly prominent role, rather the opposite. Another 4th in a row Marine. Although after 7 years of inactivity to get into a loud blockbuster Bruckheimer, and with such a cast, it's a success. During filming became clear that Michael Biehn is no longer the same. The actor forgot his lines due to excitement, feared criticism from the real Marines involved in the filming, and suffocated from the mere presence of the legendary Sean Connery. But Michael Bay managed to bring Biehn to his senses. As a result, the scene of his character arguing with General Hummel in the shower, one of the most tense and dramatic in the film.
Among Biehn's films, there were other good works, such as the drama Silver Wolf, or the TV series The Magnificent Seven. It's a remake of Seven Samurai. Michael is also one of the first actors to appear in the video game Command & Conquer Tiberian Sun, true again in the boring role of a soldier and without any graphic refinements. Technologies then were not the same. The sad 90s led to a logical result. Michael Biehn, already lover of drinking, began to openly sink to the bottom of the glass. Too much alcohol didn't allow him to figure out one complicated movie script, and he refused to audition. And these were the usual suspects. Little-known director Bryan Singer sent Biehn a script for a twisted noir detective story. Judging by further comments, actor, these two circumstances, an unnamed director and a tightly twisted plot, pushed the actor away.
I read his script. I didn't understand it. I was confused by it. It's kind of a confusing story if you're not paying attention, and I'd probably had a few drinks and thought, I don't get this, man, I don't get it, and threw it to the side. It was a huge mistake. Biehn's regrets.
Once a big star, Michael Biehn takes to drink and ends up on the sidelines of cinema, just like Rick Dalton from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood 20 years later. By the beginning of the 2000s, Biehn was finally stuck in TV series and films that bypassed cinemas and went straight to DVD. The exception was Robert Rodriguez's film Planet Terror, and could have become but did not become film by Alexei Balabanov, American. Michael was supposed to play the main role in it. In 2003, Balabanov was at the peak of his fame, having established himself as a director of art house films like About Freaks and People, and romantic action films exploring the mysterious Russian soul, like The Dialogy Brother. After watching his films, Biehn accepted the offer to play an American broker who invested millions in a Russian company. Soon discovers that the company has gone bust along with his money. To get back his lost investment, Michael Hero goes to Russia, where his path crosses with an escaped prisoner performed by Alexei Chadov. Judging by the scraps of information, the film was conceived as Brother 2 in reverse. American businessman comes to Russia and encounters with local realities, financial fraud, crime, cold, indigenous peoples of Siberia, vodka, decay, and all this to the music of the Leningrad Group. In general, a complete Balabanov set. Filming has started in New York, and at first everything went great, but having arrived in Norilsk, director discovers that Hollywood star has gone on a drinking binge. As stated in the lawsuit film company STV, for several days Biehn showed up at the site with a bottle of Pepsi, which apparently contained not only soda because the actor could barely stand on his feet, he could barely move his tongue, paid increased attention to women, and ruined all the scenes filmed with him. In the end, Biehn was fired and the American project was closed.
Drunkenness is true. Caused a lot of problems in my life. I not only did bad things to myself, I did bad things to my loved ones, the people I care about the most, your family, my parents, my children. They were all influenced by my alcoholism.
In the mid-2000s, Michael Biehn got a call from Robert Rodriguez and offered a rather large role in Planet Terror. And he also admitted that he doesn't see anyone else in the role of sheriff. Michael was inspired. One of the films that Michael Biehn now names among his favorite works, this little-known painting of 1997, The Ride, the story of a cowboy who lost everything because of his bestial lifestyle, but managed to get out. Years later, inspires Michael to fight alcoholism. Gradually, he manages to overcome his drinking binges, but there is another reason why the film is so important. While working on The Ride, Biehn met actress Jennifer Bland. Since then, they've crossed paths from time to time on film sets and castings. And in 2009, they started dating. A few years later, they got married. In the late 2000s, he missed out on 2 projects. One of them was Avatar, the revolutionary 3D blockbuster from his longtime friend, James Cameron.
According to Michael, James introduced him to the preliminary material and promised the role of the central villain, but then he invited to the Avatar also Sigourney Weaver. 2 actors from Aliens and Avatar is too much. Cameron decided that when coming to the cinema, the viewer will look at Na'vi and at the same time remember xenomorphs. To avoid cognitive dissonance, the director chose to take for the role of the villain actor Stephen Lang. And about Biehn, he said that he might take it off next time. It would be nice to find him a role of some interesting character in Avatar 4 or Avatar 5, but I don't promise anything. In any case, I look forward opportunities to working with him again, Cameron said. Another project is Alien 5. The film was developed by young director Neil Blomkamp, known for his social science fiction hit District 9. Director planned to continue the Alien franchise, leaving out of the equation all the films made after the second part, and start the story from the moment when Ripley, Hicks, and Newt leave the colony with the xenomorphs. The main roles in the new blockbuster, respectively, were supposed to be played by Weaver and Biehn. This is also indicated by the concept art posted online, created by artist Jeffrey Torrance. However, at the same time, Ridley Scott directed the very first film about alien monsters, conceived and soon began to the production of prequels called Prometheus. Although from the point of view of chronology and casting, the projects did not intersect, the action took place in the same universe. The studios naturally gave the green light to Scott, letting a respected and influential veteran go ahead, and Blomkamp was left without funding. For some time, there was talk that the Alien 5 could be resuscitated. On after that, how Prometheus created good collections, and Scott began to prepare a sequel called Alien Covenant, Blomkamp had to finally say goodbye to the dream of his own xenomorph film. And in an interview in 2018, he stated that time had been lost, and now he is busy with other projects. As for Biehn, his work schedule is still full as before, and although the films in which he plays are mainly belongs to Category B, but he does them several pieces a year. In 2011, Biehn decided to write and direct his own films with his wife. The Penn's Trial became Chinese-funded The Blood Bond, about an American Special Forces soldier who has a rare blood type 33, and the only one who can save the religious leader from death and bandits. It turned out faster film production than normal film. In addition, Michael was not allowed to edit, and he said that he doesn't consider the film his own. But the beginning was made. The second film, The Victim, a slasher made in a month and on a minimal budget, became a kind of tribute to Robert Rodriguez, who advised Biehn to film his Grindhouse. Screenwriter and executor lead actor in the good youth comedy Take Me Home Tonight, Topher Grace, personally called his childhood idol Biehn and offered to play the role of his father in this film. Finally, in the same 2011, Michael is presented with an award, a statuette Saturn for career achievement. 2 years later, Michael once again touched upon what made him famous. First, return to the role of Corporal Hicks. Truth is already in the computer game Aliens: Colonial Marines. And a little later, he voiced the main character of the Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon add-on, cybernetic super soldier Sergeant Rex Power Colt.
I hope I don't have to collect any feathers.
The choice was not accidental, fell on Biehn. This is a clear declaration of love for 80s action films. And one of the game designers described the character as Michael Biehn in Terminator. But if Michael himself was the Terminator...
You saved us, Rex.
Or just maybe, Doc. This time, you saved me.
As his longtime friend and colleague Cameron says, loud fame passed Michael by. Biehn himself, after all sorts of failures, mistakes, and failures, has already learned to take a punch, and even formulated an aphorism that supports him in difficult times. I have been disappointed so often, says the actor, that I no longer fall into depression for more than 24 hours. Michael himself admits that it is much easier for him to be a good actor on the set than a star which has attracted public attention. He is uncomfortable speaking in front of the press or walking the red carpet, to the enthusiastic cries of fans. Throughout his career, he tried to improve his acting skills, and today he promotes a sober lifestyle and shares heartfelt stories during interviews. The love of those around him eventually allowed Michael Biehn to love and accept his real self and not his fictional self, help to evaluate what managed to achieve, and not to grieve because didn't work out. Michael Biehn understood everything, and he made similar conclusions many years ago.